Okay, today I thought we'd talk about 4 recent repairs that I just did for Ozzies robots on YouTube. And I guess we can't do that with them cluttering up the whole area all at the same time. So, as you know, I work alone, so I can't do repair videos in real time on 4 different toys without editing, and because I refuse to edit, because that takes almost 2 to 3 times longer than shooting a video, this is what you're going to get. A little explanation. So anyway, he sent this very rare Testogen, and it's on a wire remote, and everything here is original. I'm not closing up this remote box because it's one of those molded hinges where it's just all plastic, and there's only X number of times a person is going to open and close that. So this is the way I received it. This is the way I'm going to use it. Snuck the batteries in. There's a switch here that will protrude out there that you can move forward or backward. It doesn't matter which way you turn. It's just an on-off switch with a center off, basically. The wires precariously just come out of the case. That's the way it was originally made. And Lord help us if the one that's going in here ever breaks, because it solders to some bits down in here which are then riveted into the plastic, and it'd be a shame to have to tear all that apart. So one of the wires, was it? No, the wires were okay in the remote half. I'm trying to remember what I did 4 repairs here, so that meant the problem was going to be in the robot. So what I originally did was start peering up inside the cracks, you know, openings in the legs, openings in the sides. And of course, in my case, my eyes are getting bad, so I put on my reading glasses, and then I'll take something like a little flashlight or something and shine it up in there. And if I can't see stuff that way, if you want to see what's going on inside a toy, I normally would take what's referred to as a grain of wheat bulb, and if they're even smaller than this, then they're called a grain of rice, and just a battery pack to run it. Because this, you can slide in through very small holes in cracks and legs and get the light right inside the toy. And the reason that a grain of wheat or grain of rice bulb is better than an LED is because LEDs are very directional, whereas the grain of wheat rice, being a filament thing, just throws light out in all directions. So once I had that up in there, I could see that the wires were in fact still attached to the motor, and I could see that the motor was mounted this way, shaft heading in the back where the wires are attached are actually up inside this rocket pack. And a few gears were visible. I tried moving them, they wouldn't move. So at that point I knew that we're going to have to open the toy. And of course, to open the toy you have a metal tab down here, tabs here. These tabs are the trickiest. Tab here, you have to bend the ear up and get the 2 tabs there. Once you get those off, then the back could be removed. And once the back was removed and slid down, I could directly see the motor. I could also see that the motor had a worm gear in the end of it, which is why I couldn't back turn any of the gears inside the robot to try to move the motor shaft. So the motor itself going in this way into the gearbox was held on with 4 tabs. It had its own mounting plate. So I removed the entire motor and mounting plate rather than disassembling any of the gearbox. Got right to the worm gear that was on the motor, and it wouldn't turn. There was no sign of rust or anything inside the toy, but that motor shaft would not turn. So I got onto it with pliers, and it was just barely able to make that thing start moving. So I put my light grade oil on both ends of the motor, also sprayed some contact cleaner into the motor, and kept working with the pliers until it got free enough where then I could start working with my fingers around and around and around. And once it started feeling looser that way, then I went ahead and turned the power on from the pack, and the motor started going, and I worked more lube into the bearings on it and some more spray cleaner into it. The gears showed no sign of wear at all. I don't believe this toy had ever worked. So whatever the defect in the motor was could very well have been there ever since it was made back in the 60s. But it works now. In fact, it runs super fast. probably just exactly like new. And I don't want to walk it off here, but let's, as you can see, it walks really well. It has a growler. It has the flashing light. Hitting that center off position is a little tricky. So there is a growler in. There's a little metal drum with a finger that comes down that hits a gear that has teeth only halfway around. So part of the noise you're hearing is your normal motor and gearbox noise, and part of the noise was intentionally being generated by the toy. Oh, and the other problem that it had was that its right leg, that would be the leg over here, the leg linkage up inside the robot had been bent, which means at some point somebody had taken this leg and tried to manually move it, and it was dinged up pretty bad. The robot actually wouldn't walk correctly because this leg wouldn't be in the right place. It would tend to fall over. So I had to straighten the metal linkage up in there. But as you can see, it turned out very well and works great. So let's set him over here. Probably spent too much time on that. And here we have this classic wind-up toy. It's a cobbler. He's making shoes. It's a very nice, incredibly nice litho all the way around the toy and everything. But the problem with this toy is the spring was broken inside. You could freely turn the key and it would never wind up. Now, in all these old wind-up spring toys, the very first thing when you're building one in the factory that goes in is the spring. So that means if you have a broken spring that needs to repair, you have to tear the entire toy down to get back to that very first step. So that means not only dismantling the clothing, the body, get to the gearbox, then you have to take the gearbox apart. In the case of a very complicated toy like this, it has dual cams to control the arms individually and the head individually. That means there's going to be shafts that go through the gearbox and are crimped on the other side. You got to remove the crimps. You have to take all that apart. You have to take all the gears out. Then once you get down to the spring, in this case it was broken like they almost always are, right near the center, about 1.5 inches from the center. Basically where it transforms from being non-tempered, because in the center it has to be non-tempered so they can bend it and lock it, to being tempered. That's usually where they break, is in that transition range. And repaired that and then put it all back together. It's a nightmare. It took probably about 3 hours. I hate doing it. But in the end, it's worth it, because the toy, he goes through different cycles. I don't want to wind it up too much because I don't want to be the one to break it. Here, I'll help it. And I'm going to make sure it's pretty much all the way unwound here, because I don't want to leave the spring with too much tension on it. So, turned out really well. How long will it last till the spring breaks again, since it's still the original spring? I don't know. In fact, I don't want to know. All I know is it works now. It's back together. Recently on Ozzy's channel, he had this Donald Duck toy. And it actually is built with Donald sitting off to the side. It was intentionally the way he's tabbed and mounted on. He sits to the side. It's very odd. But anyway, the plastic head originally was meant to be removed, I think, so this whole thing would fit in a smaller box, and the head probably packed up here in the box. But the plastic neck had places. There's a flat piece of metal that comes up that this head is connected to, and the plastic just would sit down on that. Well, that plastic had broken many years ago, and someone had wrapped around the broken part of the neck with some red electrical tape, polyvinyl tape, and also put some around the metal in there to try to hold the head in place. I ended up building up the broken part of the neck with new plastic and making a slot for that to go into. I went ahead and tacked it with just a little bit of E6000 glue, which is a rubbery type glue. So if the head needs to be removed, it can still be removed, but it isn't going to fall off on its own. It's a crimped toy, meaning there's no tabs. If the spring mechanism in there ever completely quits, then you're just shit out of luck, because the entire framer on here is crimped, tabbed in such a way that if you opened it up, you're going to destroy the looks, because you'd have to bend and just goof everything up. He didn't send it with a key. This is just a key that I had for some of my wife's wind-up toys, which fit it. But basically, it just moves along, and as it moves, the head will bob up and down. And let's leave that in an unwound state as well. I have no intention of winding it up all the way. There we go. And this little cardboard piece just kind of floats. I think Ozzy mentioned something in this video that there should have been a cape or something around there. And I think the cape would have helped hide the hole between the head and everything. I don't know. Unusual toy though. And that brings us down to the Space Trooper. Now the Space Trooper toy, in this case it did have one broken wire in the battery box. And when I reattached that, it still wasn't working. So that meant I was going to have to open it up, which wasn't a big deal because someone had been in there before. In fact, this part here was hanging off when I received it. But if you ever have to get one of these, basically there's two little tabs here. You need to straighten those. You can lift the bottom piece off. Then there's a tab here, here, and here. And same on this side. Straighten those, remove those, and then straighten the tab in the front. You can remove the front half of the body and get into the motor. Once I could get into the motor, I could lube up the shafts, sprayed some contact cleaner into the brushes, and push the buttons and got everything going again. That's reverse, here's forward. This operates on a single C-cell battery. You can see it really moves right along when things are working right. Has a little spinning widget up in the head. Got the little light bulb and everything off a single, I said C, I meant D, a single D-cell battery. As you can see, it takes up the entire battery box. And was able to keep all the original wires. They are getting very, very old and very stiff, but they haven't cracked yet, so it's best to leave everything original whenever possible. The side pieces were almost total, the chrome was almost 100% gone. And usually when chrome's 100% gone, then I'll go ahead and repaint them with Molotow chrome paint, because it looks really good. If most of the chrome or 50% of the chrome had still been there, I'd have left it alone. But at this point there was nothing to lose, because it just looked like pieces of rust on the side of the robot. And now they're chromed again. And of course, if someone didn't like the fact that they were Molotowed, you could bend those tabs, take them off, and wipe it off with some lacquer thinner and have your rust back again. So there you have it, 4 repairs for Ozzies robots.